What's up everyone, my name is Josh and this is Josh Unboxed and welcome back to another video. And today marks the 1 year anniversary of me jumping back into this hobby, rediscovering a hobby that I once loved as a kid. And I remember 1 year ago, the first card I bought, and that was a 1996 Fleer Metal Kobe Bryant BGS 9.5 True Gem, all 9.5 subgrades. I remember specifically what happened too. I shot an offer for $325, guy accepted, and the rest, as they say, is history. First started off with that card, then bought a lot of 4 Dirk Nowitzki Topps cards, Topps rookie cards, and bought a lot of 3 1996 Skybox Kobe Bryant cards, which those 3 cards were part of a batch of my first cards graded. One of them got a 9, one got an 8, and one ended up coming back, not reaching the minimum grade, because at the time I was setting minimum grades on my submissions, setting it down to PSA 8. I felt those cards were at least an 8, and 2 of those cards were at least an 8, and one of them didn't meet that requirement. But as I reflect on this past year of sports card collecting, there was an evolution in terms of my thought process, in terms of who I am and what I wanted to be in this hobby. There's so many different avenues you can dive into. You can be a pure collector, you can go into investing, you can go into flipping, whichever category you want to put yourself into, and you can fall into multiple categories. And I always think about investing and collecting and flipping. I dabble in all 3, and almost everyone dabbles in all 3 without knowing it. But the evolution or the change that I've experienced for myself within the past year has been remarkable, to say the least. When I first came into this hobby, I got excited watching a bunch of YouTube content. Sports Card Investor, I was really big on watching his stuff. Sports Card Invest, watching his videos, watching guys like the Hobby Box, Personal Finance Dad, Brad the Comeback and Card Investor, Les Alex. I watched a bunch of these guys. PSA Collector. I'm naming guys off the cuff. Tyler Short, Elico 3, a bunch of YouTube content. And some of them were focused on investing, some of them were focused on collecting. And I really got bit by the investor bug, right? Where I felt that, hey, you can make a lot of good money in sports cards. Buying sports cards, selling sports cards. Cards are on the rise. It seems like no matter what card you pick, that card seemed to go up. And part of me, when I jumped back in, there was still a collector inside me, but I guess in a sense I kind of suppressed that collector in me to kind of focus mainly on the investing side. Like, one thing that stopped me from buying a lot of cards that I liked was the idea of, do I see this card increasing in value over time? And that was a question I often asked myself when I was buying sports cards back then, and trying to see, okay, in X amount of months, do I see this card jumping up this much? And so on and so forth. So that's why when I dabbled first jumping in, I made some good decisions and I made some bad decisions. It's all hindsight 2020 based off of, reflecting on what I've done. Buying a whole bunch of DeAndre Ayton Prism base cards raw, thinking to myself, I can get those cards graded, get a PSA 10, and then sell them all for $100 and something bucks. Buying it at $20, getting graded at $20, and then selling it off for like $150. And I ended up buying guys like RJ Barrett. Another YouTube channel that I watched a lot during that time was the High Upside Show. Joined their Discord, paid for the membership service, thinking to myself, let me learn from what everybody's talking about and see if I could find my way, find my path. It was short-lived. I think I was only a part of that Discord group for about a month before I cut it off and started to try to find my own path. And as I was going through the sports card journey, as I was going through this phase back in August, I made the decision to go strictly back into collecting, to appeal or to feed the collector side of me. So a lot of those cards that I invested in back then, my Karl Anthony Towns cards, my DeAndre Aytons, my RJ Barretts, my Ben Simmons, Trae Youngs, I ended up selling them and started focusing on rarity at the time. So I would buy rare inserts, stained glass Kawhi Leonard. I bought an Aurora Court Kings, Trae Young. I bought some Shaq cards. I started focusing more on rarity at the time because I felt like, hey, with rare cards, you can't go wrong. I had a PSA 9 1957 Topps Variation Kevin Durant rookie card. I had that. I think I bought that for $117 in a PSA 9. Ended up selling it for $200, and I took the $200 and bought a raw gold version of that card that was numbered out of 2009 because I felt that card was better long term. So as you can see, my thought process started evolving in terms of how I wanted to view myself as a collector / investor. I started thinking more about rarity, thinking more about the cards that I liked versus just trying to follow trends and trying to make money. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with wanting to make money off of this. There's nothing wrong with it. Do you do what you want to do. All respect, much love to you guys that are able to turn profit by flipping. It's great. It takes a lot of knowledge and a knack for the game and a good feeling to be able to do those things. And it requires a lot of work. You can't knock hard work, and that's the whole thing. Everyone puts in their effort to try to navigate through the sports card market, and a lot of times I found myself struggling, I think, for the first couple of months trying to figure out my identity of where I wanted to be. Throughout the whole year, my whole evolution, my whole thought process, finding my identity, setting goals really started to come to fruition back after that first spike in the hobby in August. After that happened, and everything started going down, that's when I started to realize that following these trends, this market is very, very cyclical. This market is very, very volatile. We got to make much more sound purchasing and selling decisions. So that's when I started really putting in the research, really putting in the time and trying to figure out what cards should I be buying. And that's when I started making my decisions as buying those 1993 SP Derek Jeter cards, buying a Mike Trout rookie card at the time in October, going towards the whole process of it. The way I kind of think about it in terms of the classifications of people within this hobby, there's your collectors, there's your investors, there's your flippers. Now, personally, the way I see it and the way I see myself, I lump the collector and investor into one. Because when I buy my cards, the idea of investing is more of a long-term thing. I buy what I like, and I hope that the cards that I like will turn into good investments over time. I'm not going to be the one to reap the benefits of my investments. That's actually going to fall to my son. He's going to get to do whatever he wants with these cards. Whether he decides to carry on the torch and collect as well, or if he decides to sell them off, to help fund for a house or college or whatever that he decides to use it for. That's going to be his prerogative. That's going to be his decision. For me, the joy comes from the collecting, finding joy in doing what I do, the strategies that I'm putting into place, trying to stay 1 or 2 steps ahead of the game, trying to buck the trends and trying to create trends. That's where the fun lies in for me. And that's what, drives me. And the fact that I hope one day my son is able to capitalize or be able to reap the benefits from my decisions that I'm making today. It's to set him up in the future. And that's the driving force. That is the driving force of me and my collecting goals. I find joy in everything that I buy. And that's not to say that I don't dabble into flipping as well, because in order for me to buy the cards that I want, and in order for me to buy the bigger cards to add for long-term investments, I have to flip. That's the whole thing that drives. I have a limited budget each month to put into sports cards. So in order for me to buy a big card, I'm going to need to buy some prospects and sell them and try to gain that capital to put into another card. And then we start the process all over again. And I think for myself, that's a perfect balance. It's hard to find a balance between collector and investor, right? And flipper. So the way I kind of do it for myself is to lump my collecting and investing into one and the flipper on the other side. So while I buy guys like Gretzky, Jordan, Kobe, I'm buying guys like Kyler, Lamar Jackson, Fernando Tatis, those types of players that if those cards increased in value, then I can sell them because I'm still prospecting with those guys. Those guys' stories have not been completely told yet for me to feel fully invested in them. As much as I'm a fan of Tatis, the story's not yet told. The story's not yet finished. the whole thought process of balancing the collector and investor is very, very tough. It's hard, there's a lot of cards that you like, but at the same time, in the back of your head, you're kind of thinking, will this card increase in value? And that's what I struggled with in the beginning. And then I kind of let that go. And then now I'm trying to make much more sound decisions to set myself better in the future, set myself up better in the future, especially for my son. So yeah, after 1 year, I feel like I'm at a good place right now in terms of my collecting goals, my investment portfolio, my thoughts on flipping, investing, collecting. I feel like I'm in a good space, but that's not to say that I won't evolve, I won't change up certain things, because as this market changes, as this market evolves, I'm gonna have to change my thought process. I'm gonna have to change the way I do things, because if you get stuck in your old ways, you can't progress forward. It's hard to move forward if you're always looking back. So one of the most difficult things for people, especially a friend of mine that I knew back in grad school, he had trouble adjusting to the new prices of sports cards. He was able to buy, back then PSA 10s for a fraction of the price of what they are now. And he got stuck in the whole PSA 10 mode where it was hard for him to buy PSA 9s or look at PSA 8s, because the prices for PSA 8s and PSA 9s were the prices that he was paying for PSA 10s back then. If you're always looking back at that, then you never move forward. You're not able to evolve along with the times or change with the times. That's the whole process of going from good to great. If you really want to be great, if you want to step away from being good and being great, you're gonna have to stay 1 or 2 steps ahead. You're gonna have to listen to the trends, keep your ear to the streets, if you will, and see what everybody's talking about. You don't have to follow the trends. You set the trend. You do what you like. You do what you want, and that's pretty much where I'm coming from. I think there is a balance to be had. At least I think that's the overall message. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video talking about my 1 year in this sports card hobby and how I've grown, how I've evolved, and how I will continue to grow and evolve as I continue on with my sports card journey. But and when it comes to this, it's fun. It's a fun hobby. If you allow yourself to get fully vested in it and enjoy the ride, enjoy what you're collecting, enjoy what you're buying, it's a fun ride. You don't need to stress out about, is this card going to go up, or this card has dropped in value. Don't stress out about it. In a sense, you have no control over what the market's going to be. So why not just enjoy the ride, buy what you like, buy what makes you happy, and hopefully those cards will increase in value over time. But at the same time, if you really want to try to trade up and get the higher end cards for your PC, then dabble once in a while in the whole investing, flipping aspect of it. Not to say to strictly focus on that 100%, but find a fine balance. I like to say my whole thing is 70-30 or 80-20 in terms of collecting versus flipping. I think that's a nice balance, because even within the collection, there's still an opportunity to flip or sell there. And that's part of the whole trading up to getting a card that you like, a better card that you'll like in your PC instead. But yeah, sorry about the long video. It's just something that I wanted to talk about as I reached my 1 year today. And I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys found some value in this. If you guys did, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. And with that being said, my name is Josh, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.